Welcome to the NAB show, New York. I am your host, Matthias Omatola, for the 3D Motion Show at Maxon here. I'm accompanied by a longtime user, big inspirer for our industry, Nick, the founder of Grayscale Gorilla. He's been training, doing tutorials, tools at Grayscale Gorilla for more than 10?
Oh, yeah.
More than 10 years.
Oh, yeah, since 09.
09, yeah, wow. So for many, I think that's when I started. I think that might be, yeah, so from the beginning,
Glad you're here.
We've been building things out. So for those of you who haven't yet, make sure you get your badge scanned. Sign up at 3dmotionshow.com. We're giving away an amazing laptop as well as a SenseLabs tablet next week. So go ahead and fill that out. And until then, enjoy Nick Campbell, Grayscale Gorilla. Give him a round of applause.
Wow. Thank you, Matthias. It's always awesome to be here at the Maxon booth. Like Matthias has said, I've been doing this for quite a few years. It's always amazing to be back here, see you guys live, see you guys online. Cheers online, cheers in person. If you've been paying attention, you've been seeing all the amazing new stuff that Maxon's been adding to Cinema 4D. The last couple versions have been like a renaissance in the dynamic systems and the cloth and the ropes. And if you watched EJ's presentation a couple hours ago, he went through a lot of amazing, beautiful stuff. And of course, as soon as these new features come out, I'm playing with it. Everyone's playing with it, and just seeing what's possible. And what I love about it is we don't really know what's possible until artists like you start playing with these amazing tools. So I'm really excited today to be here and to show you some of the fun stuff that I've been playing with in Cinema 4D. So the cloth has been so much fun. The entire team's been playing with it. This is a preview of some materials coming out soon using the cloth dynamics. We have a bunch of stuff that the team's been working on. We'll get to that a little bit later. I wanted to show you some displacement stuff that we've been working on as well. And today we're talking about the new dynamics. So this is the cloth dynamics. Who's used the new cloth dynamics? Who's downloaded it? Love it. If you've used the old cloth dynamics, you've used small objects, right? You've been very careful about how much geometry you put in this thing. What's really amazing about the new cloth and the new dynamic system and new simulation system in general is you could be very, you could add a lot of geometry to it and a lot of stuff. And it's going to allow us to do something today that I've always wanted to do in cinema and never been able to do until this latest version. So let me show you a couple more renders. I've been playing around with this cloth stuff. We have something on the left here, this red one, where you have a field force pulling things in. We have a piece of cloth with a ton of geometry floating around and the camera's following it around. And then of course over on the right we have something a little bit more abstract. We have this like metal kind of cloth. And I even started playing with soft bodies in the new systems. That one's not looping. Soft bodies with geometry. You can see you could add a lot of geometry in here and it pushes it through. Later in the presentation, I wanted to show you some displacement. And don't worry if you haven't been playing with displacement. This is from our new clay material collection in Grayscale Gorilla, part of our tactile materials, and we'll talk a little bit more about later. But more importantly about displacement is it now exists, and it's very fast, and it's beautifully done. So if you're Redshift, we have tutorials for you guys, Arnold, Octane, and these are all on YouTube for free if you're looking at diving deeper into displacement. Because we're going to touch a little bit on it today, but these videos go in a little bit deeper. We also have some incredible tutorials. We have an EJ tutorial, this claymation one. And again, cloth and some of the new rope simulations. If you want to dive deeper, go check out our YouTube. You can follow us at Grayscale Gorilla. I think it's youtube.com/Grayscale Gorilla. And follow us, hit the bells, do all the YouTube stuff. What the YouTubers are saying. And we hope to see you over there. We're learning. We're having a lot of fun. So today, I wanted to show you guys how to make this from scratch in Cinema 4D. Now, there's a reason, two things. There's a reason I like to start from scratch, especially when doing these types of tutorials, because I want you guys to see how fast you can get to a result like this using Cinema 4D and using these tools so that you can understand how fast you could really work in a program like this. And also, if you're following along at home, it's just a lot easier if I use standard shapes and starting from scratch so that you're not, wondering where I got the model. So this specific look is something that I've seen it online, right? I've seen Houdini do this kind of stuff. I've seen other programs kind of do this incredible soft body transformation where it's, like rigid, and then all of a sudden it just explodes into cloth, and then it goes back to something more bubbly. And this has been something that I've always wanted to do, and now you could do relatively straightforward using the new simulations. So let's head on into Cinema 4D, and let me show you how to set that up. So here we are, default start from scratch Cinema 4D. And of course, the first thing we need to do is make some spheres. This is a classic Grayscale Gorilla tutorial, guys. We're starting with some spheres. I'm going to shrink it down a little bit to 30 centimeters or so. And one thing with cloth you want to make sure is that your geometry is as even as possible. It does help the animation and helps the simulation react a little bit more dynamically. So right now, I want to come into my sphere and set this to hexahedron, and you can see we have a more even mesh with our sphere. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. Again, you can get pretty dense with your meshes. In fact, further than this. And if I wasn't doing a live tutorial, we'd really crank this up. Okay, guys? But for now, let's do that. Let's grab a cloner. Now, I'm going to use Shift-C, which is something I'm going to use a ton. Shift-C lets you search Cinema 4D across the board for anything you're looking for. So if you're ever wondering where things are in different menus, Shift-C is your friend, and you just type it in. In this case, we want a cloner. So I'm going to type in cloner, and you can hit enter, and it automatically adds it into your objects. I'm going to put my sphere in the cloner. I'm going to shrink this down here so I can make a little clump of spheres. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I'm going to turn up our count so that we go further in Y, and let's go 4 by 3 by 3. That sounds about right. So at this point, we also don't want them all to be the same size. We could do Shift-C and type random. And if I spell it right, it'll show up at the top of the list. You hit enter again, and as long as you have the cloner selected, it will automatically randomize that cloner. And now you can see we have random position. Well, I don't want random position. I actually want random scale. So I'm going to come into scale, turn on uniform scale, and set this something like 0.4, 0.5. Got my random spheres. We're getting there close. Now, of course, I want them all to be dynamic. Now, in the past, you could come up here and use these bullet tags, use rigid body, and make them bounce around. But there's a new, relatively new place tool called Dynamic Place in Cinema 4D that allows you to dynamically place objects without having to go simulate it, if you just need to place them. So let me show you how to do that. In this case, I want to right-click on my cloner, and I'm going to say, let's go make editable, or let's just go current state to object, actually. I'm going to turn off our cloner, and now you can see we have a bunch of these spheres separately. If I shift-click, I could select them all, and now I want to use Dynamic Place to build my clump of spheres. And it's right over here on the left. You have your Place tool, which I also use all the time, and a Dynamic Place right below it. And if you just simply click on your objects, you now have control, just like a dynamic simulation, but you don't have to set up the tags or anything. It's just built into Cinema now. So I can place this on a table. I could push this up against the wall. I could say I want it to stretch out more in Y. But I'm just using these X, Y, Z controls to kind of build my clump. And I could spin around and say, man, what a great looking clump, folks. All right, so once you have it the way you want, there's also a fourth slider here. And we just want to push these apart a little bit so that there's no collisions. It's this diagonal one right here. And if you do this, it's kind of, let me find it with the pen. It's kind of like pushing all of your particles apart a little bit. And this is fun. You can actually animate this stuff pretty simply and have your own animation here. But in this case, all we want to do is just make sure they're not touching. So I'm just going to pull this apart a little bit. And let's call that our clump O spheres. So what do we do now? Well, we need to make this one object so that we could use cloth dynamics and cloth simulation within it. So to do that, we're going to hit Shift-C and grab a connect object. And once you have a connect object, you can put almost anything in a connect object, and it'll stitch it all together into one piece. Super helpful thing that I use all the time in Cinema. Whenever something's not working the way that I want, I'll use a connect object, and sometimes it just magically fixes stuff. In this case, it's telling it this is one object. I can now right-click on my connect object, and I could go down here to, again, current state to object, and I can now turn off my connect, turn off all this stuff, and let's just turn off our cloner, and I'm going to hold down Alt and click these little traffic lights to turn off my cloner. and I literally have my connect object that I now have all of this geometry in one piece. So what can we do now that it's all in one piece? We can add some simulation, cloth dynamics to it, and it instantly turns to cloth. Now, if I hit play, it'll just start falling to the ground. We need it to interact. So one thing we could do is just grab a plane, move it down, go to tags, go to simulation and turn on collider. And of course now our soft bodies now collide with the floor. Already my brain is blown playing with this stuff the first time. Like, you can never do this much geometry without intersections, with everything. It just works. It just looks great. It falls to the floor. But here's the problem. I want to art direct this cloth. I want to tell this cloth what to do, not just let gravity make it fall on the floor. I want to control it. And if I had a client that wanted their logo to animate, of course, they want it to be art directed. They want it to be what they want. And Maxon built the tools in to allow you as the artist to take control of your cloth dynamics and your systems to make these things do what you want artistically instead of what gravity wants. So I wanted to show you how to quickly set that up. So now that we have our soft body here, I'm going to turn off our plane, and under our soft body, our cloth tag, I should say, under our cloth tag, we have a bunch of options. The soft bodies are amazing, by the way. We won't get into those today, but this is its own separate powerful tab. Same with ballooning, all this amazing stuff that's sitting here. But if you look at the surface tag, you're going to see a bunch of settings like how bendy do you want your cloth, how stretchiness do you want it, do you want it to stretch or keep it taut? And this one right down here is target length, which we're going to use in a minute. But if you look at this tab over on the right, there's this one called mix animation. Think of mix animation like the follow position, follow rotation that was in the original rigid body dynamics. If you've used rigid body dynamics, I'm sure you've used follow position, follow rotation, which is essentially like stay where I want you to, and don't just be falling on the floor, cloth. You know, that's what this does. So if we simply just turn on with force, which is my favorite one to use, and you hit play, you're going to see the cloth start to droop a little bit, but it wants to stay where it was born, essentially. And the higher that you turn this up, the more strength it's going to try to force itself back to where its starting position was. So what can we do with this? Well, we can control this not just by turning it up and down, but by using a vertex map. And this is where the new system gets super powerful. So let me show you guys how to set this up really fast. With the connect object selected, I'm going to hit Shift-C, use this thing for everything, and type in vertex. And under vertex, it's the second one down here. It's this one with the little dots. I'm going to just click it to add it to my object. And you can see instantly it turns all red. So vertex maps are basically like painting on your object to tell different vertices and different parts of your object to do different things. This is used in materials. It's used all over the place in 3D. We're going to use it to control that soft body and cloth dynamics so that we can control what we want it to do. And to do that easily, you have your vertex map tag selected, and then you can click on Use Fields. This is super powerful. You can use anything in fields to now control your vertex map. And I'm going to delete that freeze one, which is just the default. And instead, I'm going to pull in a linear vertex map. And I'm going to shrink this down just so you can see what's happening. On the left-hand side, you see it's all red like it was when it started. But on the right, it's now all bright yellow. And essentially, this is 0 and 1 in vertex map speak, or 0 and 100%. And what we're saying right now is half of these spheres are painted 0, and half of these spheres are painted 100%. What do we want to do with that data? Well, we want to go into our cloth tag, go to mix animation, and you see there's a map setting right here. And it's literally asking you to just drag a map in. And now when we turn our plane back on and we hit play, you're going to see that half of our system is falling to the floor. Half of our system is like, nah, I'm good where I am. I'm going to stay right here. And we have now control on how to animate this. this gets really fun. If we could just do this live. If we grab the linear field and we start over on the left, it's just going to be static. And as we move, I'm going to extend my timeline just so we're not looping around so fast. As we move the linear field in, it's now allowing parts of our animation to fall. This blew my mind. I love this stuff. So now, by the way, it works the other way. No, I want you to actually go back to where you were. And the higher that we turn up that strength, the more force it's going to try to go back to where it was. So if we crank this up to 8 or 9 or 10, let's say, now it's really going to push. It's going really fast. And look at how beautiful that is. And we're just sitting here in real time in the viewport doing this. So what can we do now that we have this with this ultimate power of our vertex maps? Well, we can do more than just linear fields. It works across the board with noises and all this stuff. But what I really want to do is make essentially two different animations. I want to take these spheres and say, when you're born, you're beautiful, round spheres. Classic. When I pass the first linear field through you, I want you to turn into some fun cloth. And then when I pass another linear field through you, I want you to be free and float into the air. Okay, there's my creative brief. Let's build this thing. So how do we set something like that up? Inside of our vertex map, we can come down here into our linear field and set it to 50%. Okay, this allows us to not only have two states of transition. We now have 3 states, if you think about it. We have a 0% state, which is red. We have a orange state in between, which is kind of our middle state. And then we have our 100% state, which is going to be all white. Or I'm sorry, all yellow. So we can do that. Let's animate this super quickly. We're just going to keyframe this for now. Over on the left, I'm going to go back to 0. I'm going to be really lazy and just click this keyframe button and move forward into like frame 50, move our linear field over, and let's just set a keyframe. So now we have step 1 of our animation going from 0 to 50%. And you can see it's still not moving, right? Because of the strength of our mix animation, even at 1 or 2, it's going to fall a little bit, but it's still not moving. But we can actually control something else. If we open up our surface settings in our cloth tag, you can see that they all have this little triangle next to them. And if you open up these triangles, you see a map. Where have we seen that before? Well, we can drag any vertex map into here, and we can have multiple vertex maps. You can take as much control as you want. In this case, I want to go down to target length. Now let's just turn up target length and see what happens. By default, these things are like puffing out and becoming larger. It's almost like ballooning out, but it doesn't have all that pressure that ballooning has. It's just like fluffing up the cloth. But I don't want it all to happen at once. I only want this to happen a little bit. And I also want it to follow the vertex map. So what do? I just drag in that same vertex map. And now we're getting 2 for 1. It's bubbling up. And also it's not falling to the floor anymore because we turned up our mix animation settings. So imagine the mix animation's at 2 by default. As soon as the first linear field goes through it, it's now at 1 because it is 50%. And if we just do one more linear field or crank it all the way up to 100%, this will essentially go to 0. So let's do that. Really quickly, we can create a new linear field. And I'm just going to go into the tag directly, create a new one. Let's shrink this one down. And you can see now we have our orange to yellow transition that's starting to happen. But in this case, I'm going to grab a null and put our second linear field inside of it so that we could grab rotation and move it up and over to the right here. And this will be our next animation coming down through the system. How do we do it? Well, we just grab our linear field and we overlap some keyframes. Don't forget to overlap your keyframes, folks. You don't want to go 1 then 2. You want to kind of maybe start here. When this is almost done, we're going to set a new keyframe for our second linear field. And then further down the road, we're going to grab it. We're going to move it through. And we're going to set another keyframe. So let's see what this does. Let's turn on the vertex colors so we can see what's happening. It's going to orange first. And then we're going to yellow. What does yellow do? Yellow says, you're not stuck here anymore. Be free. Well, don't be free. Let gravity control you and fall you to the ground. But haha, we can control gravity because we are in 3D, folks. Ultimate power. Let's go control gravity and say, rather than pull you to the ground, fly away like a bubble. And to do that, we're going to hit Control D. We're going to go into simulation, and we're going to go to the scene settings. And rather than negative gravity, we could first of all set it to 0. And let's just see what that looks like if we say 0. Let's run this simulation. At 0, it's going to basically stay where it is, but it's going to have cloth. And it's just going to kind of push apart a little bit. But that's not what we want. We want them to fly away and be free. So we say 300 gravity, and now they fly away. So here's our animation. Cloth land, and then bubble fly away land. Faster. Be free faster. Come on. Okay, so what can we do from here? Well, that's great for animation. You could do so much more with Vertex. Remember I said that you could control not just animation, but you could also control textures and other things with Vertex maps. Let's start to set that up. It's at this point in the process, usually, once I have an animation that's like getting closer to what I want, I'm sure there's more tweaks. We're going to do the animation, but somewhere, if you're like me, around this point of working on something, I'm tired of looking at gray stuff. Okay, I want to start to make it look good. I want to start to see what maybe something closer to the final render will look like. So I'll usually take a break around this point and say, let's set up some basic lights. Let's set up some basic materials. And so let's get something we could see that looks closer to the final. And so we could judge our speed and our vibe, and mostly the vibe. Look, only good vibes. All right, so for this, I'm going to shift to my Redshift layout. This is my standard layout. This is how I usually work in Cinema 4D. It gives me my Redshift layout right here. I have Grayscale Gorilla Tools docked. I have all this stuff ready to go. More importantly, it allows me to look at my render next to the gray render and see what it's going to look like in its final form. Now, this needs some work. Okay, let's add a material. Right up here, you're going to have your material tab. Go to Create, and you can see we do not have Redshift materials. Where is it? Let's go up to our menu bar. Oh, no Redshift. Where is Redshift? Well, always remember, you got to go turn on Redshift, and then the menu will turn on. In fact, that's not always true. You'll want to make sure this preference is turned on. I always have this on. Go in your preferences, go to Renderer, Redshift, and down here you're going to see Redshift main menu checkbox. This is off by default. If you're wondering where your Redshift menu is, go click this on, and that allows this menu to pop up, which I use all the time. Once you have this menu on, now you can go grab something like Dome Light. And, well, let's do our material first. So we have Create. Now when we open up our menu, we have Redshift Materials. Let's go Materials, Standard Material. And let's drag this onto our, let's find our Connect object. There you are. And if we hit play on our IPR, you can see we have our geometry here. Ooh, we're getting some funky geometry, folks. Well, I think we just have some duplicate geometry somewhere. We could just turn off some of this stuff. And I think we're fine. I'm just going to delete it. OK, so there's our geometry. And, of course, we also have a dome light. Dome light's already better than the standard light, but dome light's just a white void. If you're a Plus member, you could just come down here to Texture and drag in Texture into your drop zone. And it's going to automatically add an HDRI link tag. And it's going to pull in a basic HDR. And, of course, from here, you can go into your HDRs, and you could pick your favorite one. So in my case, it's Creative Office, which always looks great. And as soon as we click it, we get reflections, we get a background, we get all this stuff ready to go. If you don't want it visible in the viewport, by the way, if you have HDRIs you want to use on your computer or anything, you can click here and click right there. And then on your desktop, if you're following along, you can grab any HDR and throw it right there. If you don't want it to be visible in the render, you come down here to background and you turn that off. And from here, I'm going to turn off the plane just so I could kind of focus on this. I'm also going to go to render settings and turn this into more of a square render. So let's go 1280 by 1280. And there are, of course, 4 major things you need to do for every render to make it look good. If your render is not looking good to you, there's probably one of 4 things that's happening. there's either a material issue, your lighting is not the way it should be, your camera is not where it should be, or you're not using the correct lens, or your scale is way off. And one of those 4 things is usually when I'm looking at a scene, I'm like, why is it not feeling the way I want? Why is it not giving me the emotion, the vibe I'm trying to go for? It's usually one of those 4 things. Well, we just did 2 of them. We added material, we added lights, we added one of my favorite HDRIs, and we're missing one of the most important ones, which is your camera. So under Redshift, you're gonna go to cameras, standard camera, and you almost never wanna use the default built-in lens. You want to use, think like a director of photography, right? You're picking the lens that's right for your shot. In this case, I imagine these spheres are a little small, maybe on a desk. They're feeling smaller in the world, so that I want to zoom in. When things are small on a desk, you want to grab your telephoto or your macro lens, which are usually like 80 millimeters or 100 millimeters, something like that. So you can come into your focal length and just type it in, and now you're going to get a more realistic lens when we start to zoom in here. Okay, all that said, this is where I like to get to when I'm like, okay, now we're on to something. Now I have something to look at. And now we want to control not only the animation, but we want to control the actual texture and control the colors and other parameters using these vertex maps. So if you haven't done that, it's actually pretty straightforward. It involves the new nodes. So if I double click on my material and I open up my basic tab, you're gonna see node editor. In the node editor, you're gonna see some nodes. Now, if you've been a little anxious to jump in here and like, these nodes are not for me, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get through this together. It is very straightforward and not as complicated as it looks. In fact, all you need is a couple nodes to get really dangerous here in the nodes, especially with vertex maps. So, first thing we need to understand is this is just a regular material, right? Ignore this node thing. Over here, we can go change colors, we can go change reflections and all this stuff right over here. But we get more control as soon as we start playing with this node system, and that's what we're after today. Control, folks. We're trying to control these things. So let's go in and click this plus button, and let's grab just type in vertex. And right here, you're gonna see the vertex attribute. If we double click on that, it's going to, let's just drag it into the interface. It is now gonna ask us, what vertex map do you want to use, the attribute name. All we have to do is drag in our vertex map, and now it's tied to here. And if we drag it into our color, you're gonna see that it's going to not really do what we want. And that's because we're missing a step. Let's go back and turn off our IPR. And you can see that all pink is not what we want. We actually want, instead of red to yellow, we want to control what colors show up. So for that, we're gonna have to click on this plus menu and type in ramp, R-A-M-P. And here's a fun trick. If you're using the new nodes and you let me start again here, ramp, and you're using these nodes, you can actually drag in any node on top of a wire and it will automatically stick to that wire. So I'm just gonna drag ramp and I wanna put it right there. See how it highlights? As soon as it highlights, if I let go, it does that noise. Sticks right to it. And now the vertex is going through a ramp. What does this give us in the world? Well, a ramp right now is just black to white. Remember, we looked at that vertex map and the vertex map was red to yellow. All this ramp is doing is converting red to yellow to black to white for now. Okay, so literally, if we just look at our render and we just hit play, we should see half of that material is black on the red side of our vertex map, and then on the right side, we're seeing gray. Because remember, we're doing halfway first, and then we're going 100% when it comes to the second animation. So now, let's go wait for the rest of the bubble. And if we hit play here, you're gonna see white on the upper left and gray on the bottom right, okay? Does that make sense so far? Pretty straightforward, not too scary, but we have control now over every part of this transformation simply by changing the ramp on this node. So now instead of black to white, I want to do 3 different transitions. I want to do a 50% color, and if I hold control, I can make a third one and do 3 sets, right? 0, 50%, 100%. So, of course, we got to pick our colors now. Let's start with a classic reddish-orange sphere. Let's go into something more lighter orange, okay? This will be kind of our middle state. And then let's mix it up at the end, and let's go like teal, kind of something a little bit brighter. You know, they're like floating away. I want them to be a little bit more fun. And, oh, don't hit X, by the way. You got to hit OK. Let's try that one again. All right, let's go there. OK. And so now you see we have 3 different states. We have original, and then you saw the other 2. And you can actually see my my animation is crossing over. We can fix that in a minute. But I want to make sure that I show you one more thing that the materials can do, which is it's not just colors that you can control. If you go back in your node editor, you can use the vertex map to control anything. You can make a glass in the middle. You can make any setting that you can pipe this into. You can use a ramp and control it. For today, what I want to use is the roughness of the reflection. So the first part of the animation I want to be glossy. The cloth section in the middle I want to be more clothy and more matte reflection. And then I want it to go back to glossy again. So how do we do that? Well, we grab a ramp. And in this case, we'll make this one from scratch so you can see how the nodes work. You could drag in from the same vertex map into this little S. Under General Input, we're going to go to Alt Input. And then Out Color, we're going to go into Roughness. Okay, so now we have to change one more thing, which is our ramp. We need to go from glossy, which is black. I don't want it all the way glossy, so I'm going to move it up a little bit. That looks a little bit better. In the middle, I want it to be fully matte, but not quite all the way. We'll go a little bit darker than white. And then let's control click and slide into this last one. And then we'll go back to something a little bit glossier at the end. Let's check this out. Let's hit play. Now, we have the IPR running, so it's going to run a little bit slower because it's rendering. Oh, it's rendering and doing dynamics all at once. But you can see, if we just pause it, we now have, let's pause it here. We now have 3 different states. You saw the red glossy. We have orange kind of matte colored, and then we have back to this teal whatever color. And I'm also seeing one more thing. Are you guys seeing a little geometry breakup right here? You see those polygons kind of pushing through? What do we do with this? How do we smooth this out? Well, traditionally, maybe you would grab something like a subdivision surface, but with Redshift, we can just come into the Connect object, go to Tags, go to your render tags, click on Redshift Object, and under here, you're going to see this Geometry tab. This is way faster and allows the simulations to use the original geometry, and then all of this extra geometry gets added at render time. So in this tag, under Geometry, you want to override, you want to turn on Enabled, and for this one, I'm going to turn off Screen Space Adaptive, and that's basically it. Like, we now have more geometry, and we lose all of that stuff. So if you're ever having issues with your geometry and the simulation's looking fine, you just want more roundness, this is your fix for Redshift. Okay, so we are at this point where we do have to tweak our final keyframe here on this animation. And so that's something we could do right now by going to our second linear field and finding our first keyframe, moving that linear keyframe up till it's not visible anymore, and now we could just reset that keyframe, and that should work fine. Okay, so let's run through it and see where we are. Again, I'm not going to do both at once. I'm just going to show you, here's our basic state. And then let's turn off the IPR so we can let the calculation run. Actually, here's what we're going to do. We're going to bake this. Let's go into our tag, and let's pretend we love this, right? There's probably some tweaks we could do, but for the sake of time today, let's say we love the animation, and we don't want it to calculate anymore. We just want it to run faster. Where you can come in your cloth tag, go to cache, go to cache scene, and watch this percentage go. And now it's going to calculate all the geometry. If you have other cloth things or any ropes, anything happening in your scene. It's going to cache all of this at once. And then it's going to be baked in. Once it's baked in, it's going to run much faster, obviously, and it's also going to let us start to look at our renderer without having our machine do two things at once. Now our machine is focused on rendering more than it is also calculating all of this stuff. So you can see the calculation's much faster, and if we look in our render, we could just pause it now at any moment and see what this looks like. Now, it's a little bit dark. We can turn up our dome light. We need something around it. Let's, have some bounced light, for crying out loud. Let's copy and paste that plane. Let's use a Z just to have a backdrop. And if we move this up, scale this up, that's also going to give us some nice backdrop there. In fact, without the plane, I think this might be getting close to something we can kick out. So I like this vibe. I like the cloth. Let's go halfway through and check our animation. Beautiful. Love how dark that side of the cloth is. I love how you can see the wrinkles here. And then I love how all this is happening. And then let's keep going. Here comes our second transition into the third phase. And now we're sitting here. So again, we can make all these tweaks to do it, but those are the basics on how quickly, in less than half an hour, you could set this stuff up. And don't forget, you can control other things with these vertex maps, including all of these settings in here. Bounciness, stickiness, thickness, this target length we talked a little bit about. You can animate this up and down just by using a vertex map. And remember one more thing. We only used one vertex map for this animation so that I could show you the basics. You can combine these things together. You could use a separate vertex map for materials and a separate one for dynamics, and they all come together in this way that is super usable, super controllable, and super easy to change, which is the best part. Just so you know how to change things, if your client's like, yeah, great, I want those balloons to be free too, but the customer really wants them to just fall on the ground, you're like, I got you. Undo your cache, go into your tag, go to cache, and you could clear your scene cache, and just come back into your gravity and say, let's go back to original. And in this case, we won't even add a floor. We're just going to have them fall on the ground. So let me undo that. Let's pass through. Let's see what this is. Step 1. Step 2, fall to the ground. So, we got some fun geometry there too. Okay, so that's that one. I encourage you guys to go play with this stuff. They made it super, super easy to control, and you could throw a ton more geometry at this. You saw how fast this played in the viewport. There's one video card in here, and it's playing back that fast. So I encourage you to really throw a lot of geometry at this. It is really, really powerful. Okay, so for the time I have left, I wanted to show you one more demo. And this has to do with something brand new inside of Redshift that they added, I think in the latest version, which is advanced material stacking. So let me show you what this looks like. So let's open up a project. Let me head into my machine here. Desktop, classic place to put stuff. Highly recommended if you're a professional. Throw it all on the desktop, guys. All right, we're going to go to Stack Materials, and let's just go to Start. Okay, so let's hit play. So who's played with the new Redshift Stack Materials? Anybody? Yeah, all right. So this is super powerful. Right now I have a scene that is a common scene that I make called a starter scene. I'll make a starter scene all the time, which are things that I use all the time, like spheres, like lights set up, like basic materials ready to go. And I'll use this as my starting point. I don't always use them when I do tutorials because I want everybody to follow along. But when I'm working on a project, I love starting scenes like this because it lets me work faster and already be at the point where things look good and not have to always go turn on Redshift and add my lights. I just have this beautiful canvas to start painting on. So here's my starter scene. It has one of our new clay materials on it from our new tactile collection, which you can see it's like super high detailed materials. And with the clay materials in particular, they have displacement maps built in. So what does this mean? Well, displacement in Redshift is very powerful, and it allows you to displace your materials using maps inside of your materials. In this case, you can see without displacement, if I just turn it off, that there's some lovely bumping and all this stuff going on. But if you look at the edges of this object, it's not actually pushing the geometry. As soon as you turn on not only this geometry tessellation mode, but also displacement down here in your redshift tag, it starts to add geometry that pushes out using displacement. And we go into more detail in tutorials on our site, but for this I wanted to show you what you could do now with stacked materials and displaced materials. So in the past, if you wanted to add a layer on top of this, it was really pretty difficult. You had to go use nodes, complex node setups to take two separate materials and combine them together into one material in Redshift. With material stacking, you literally just drag other materials on top of this material and it just works. So for example, we can go to Create Redshift Materials Standard, and let's just drag it raw right on top. What do we get? We get the original base displacement. No matter what material you're using, no matter what type of displacement, that stays, and essentially everything else on top of it gets replaced with the new material. So what can we do with this? Well, we could create cool ink effects, let's say. This almost looks like a smudged canvas ink type of thing. So if we double click on the material, go to base properties, and pick a color, you can tell I have a favorite color, right guys? All right, so we can now get these smudgy effects just by roughening up our roughness of our material a little bit as well. So, okay, that's powerful, but you could just use the displacement map in this material and you could just do it. Well, here's where it gets really extra powerful. You could use alpha maps to also control where it overlaps with the original material. So we have some of these surface imperfections here in plus I'll use. You can use any black and white map that you have. I have these here, they're drag and droppable, so I'm gonna use them. And they're beautiful. I'm gonna click my node editor. And now you could literally, we're in New York. Let's make something a little sloppy and messy here. Let's go. Let's get funky here. All right, let's take this black and white map and just pump it directly into opacity. What does this get us? Well, now we see half of the original clay material and then half of this red texture, which is not looking as cool when it's red there. Let's just make this white for now so we could see it better. And now we have more control over all of this stuff. And we have some mapping here we can fix by, I don't know, we could just use like a spherical map or something like that. And let's set this to 50%. So that it's more uniform. Okay, so this material would be very difficult to make using the standard node systems. You'd have to really combine a lot together, but now it's like Photoshop. You just add layers on top, and as long as there's transparent areas, you can see through to the original map, okay? So what else can we do? We can also add things like stickers. This makes it super easy to do decals and stickers and logos on your objects without getting crazy with the nodes. Nodes are super powerful, but sometimes you just want to stack it on top of what's already looking good. In this case, I have this material. Let's see what this material looks like first. You know what? No. Let's put it on there first, and then I'll show you how easy this is. So I put it on by default. There's a UV map. Let's set this to flat, and let's shrink this down. I'm just going to use scale and click on my material tool right here, the kind of material adjust tool. Scale this sticker down. And instead of multiple copies, I want to go into this texture and turn off, or into this material, turn off tile. So now we just got one sticker. And let's rotate this around just a little bit as well. Let's move it across. And let's use our rotate so that it's more straight on. And hey, it's scaled a little bit wide, so let's just shrink it down so it's original. Okay, so we placed our decal here. That was way easier than using the original way of doing this. It would have taken a lot more steps. And what's really cool about this is we could just duplicate this. I'm holding down Control on my keyboard, duplicating that material. And with this one, I could create a whole new one just by scaling it up. Let's grab my move tool and let's rotate it, and now we have a second decal. Really straightforward, and this is super easy to set up. Not a lot of nodes at all. Let's open this up and see what we have. The original decal is under a texture node. Remember, you can find all these nodes right here. You just type it in, texture node right there. This is my original PNG, okay? The PNG has the color data. It also has alpha data. How do we use those separately? Well, we have to use a color splitter node, which you could find here as well. I'm pumping this texture data into the color splitter. And then from here, I'm only using the alpha to go into opacity. And then I'm just using the full-on PNG to go directly into color so that it keeps all of this color. And again, we could change all this. We can get as complicated as we want with nodes. But for the demo, I wanted to show you how quickly you can get this stuff set up. And at any moment, if you want to change the original base, you could do that just by dragging in. I'm going to go to our library and look up brick. So what's cool about these bricks, this is in our original everyday material collection from Grayscale Gorilla. All of these also have displacement on them. So if you're like, all right, the clay thing's cool, but in this case, we want it to look more like brick or something stuck on there, or there's a stencil or spray paint on brick, you can just drag one of these in. And as long as you replace the original texture that has all of the displacement on it, that it will come through to everything else that you've done. So in this case, let me go set my sphere to something. I'll just use a standard geometry so it maps properly. Okay, so now we get all of this stuff for free just by stacking our materials. Let's scale this up. Got to end on something that looks a little bit nicer. Here we go. And that's too far out. So now let's go back all the way back down to the brick. And you can see now the displacement's on here, ready to go. By the way, if you ever want to adjust how much displacement, it's right down here. This is a little too much. That brick's a little too chunky for me. I'm going to reduce it down to make it a little bit more subtle. But again, everything else that we've done, we can now layer on top of it. We can pull in the sticker and do all the same stuff that we did before. Very simply, just by adjusting our material and scaling this down. Oh, I see it's on UV mapping. Frontal. Oh, yeah. Not sure why that's not working right there. Flat. Sheesh. Come on, Nick. There we go. Same thing. Let's turn off tiling, and there you go. Fully movable, fully adjustable, and layers upon layers. You can see the power that you start to get now by layering this stuff. All right, so let me open up the final scene here just so you can see it all put together. And then I'm sure we have some time for some questions as well. Let me go to, let's just open one more here. There's the final stacked material with our sticker on it. So in this case, we have the clay material. And then in this case, we have one of our terrazzo materials on top of it. So this actually gives it this kind of plasticine, like almost metal look, and it's this unique material that you would have needed so many nodes to create from scratch. And then of course the sticker on top of it would be even more. Now this is just 3 materials, and what's even better is you could swap this stuff at any minute. Rather than digging through all the nodes, you can now just layer this stuff really, really quickly in Cinema, and it's all sitting right here. So super powerful. And as we get into Q&A mode, I wanted to show you guys one more time this thing. So the first thing you're seeing right here is a little sneak preview. We debated if we're going to show this, but I think with all the cloth madness, if you saw the last couple of presentations, there's been cloth all over the place, and that's because now it's so much easier to add this stuff thanks to Maxon and the new simulation systems, that we're actually coming out with our own cloth materials, canvas materials, very soon in Grayscale Gorilla Plus. So that's what all of this is created with. This is all of the standard Cinema 4D simulation built right into Cinema 4D, and our cloth materials that are coming out really soon. All this other stuff is also included. But with that, I wanted to thank Maxon again for having me, and also open this up to any questions if we have any online as well. I'm sure Matthias, let me know what's the questions. And I also wanted to thank you guys as well for being here and being a part of this live. Look at this audience. Yeah. Thank you guys.
Yeah, Nick. All right, let's see. Lily, let's see if we have any questions online. They were just happy to have you back on the stage. Really, everybody's like, "Oh, Nick, it's great." Let's start here with any questions.
It's good to be here. It's good to be
right?
here.
Back in person. Live audience questions first and foremost.
Yes.
Anyone, just raise a hand.
Oh yeah, come on, give it to me.
Wink.
Anything about the soft bodies or cloth or anything else that you guys have a question about or what it could do? Yeah. Yeah, awesome question. Go ahead.
Repeat it?
Yeah, I could do it. So the question was, I changed the gravity in this scene here, my first tutorial. And is there a way that, if I'm hearing you right, can you have gravity affect things differently and not just have a global gravity? Can you say, all right, U particles go up and U particles go down? Great question. Totally doable. And we might not be able to do the whole thing just because it's kind of a setup. What you do essentially is turn off your global gravity, which is Control D, and right here in gravity, you can just zero it out. And then if we do a Shift C and type gravity, we have a separate gravity effector, essentially. This is affecting all the dynamics. There's things like turbulence and wind. It's kind of one of those. And so what's cool about this is we could say, all right, here's our gravity settings. But now that it's a separate object, we can go into something like our soft body systems and into forces. And now we can tell specific things to use different forces. So for example, this gravity can come in here and only control that object. And then if I made a separate object and I wanted that one to, so this gravity is pulling it down. And then I can make a duplicate gravity and set this one to negative, right? Like negative 1,000 or something. And if I made a different simulation, I would drag this gravity in to that simulation and I could control that that way. Does that make sense? I could go duplicate it all, but you essentially use separate gravities and you use the force tab, what's it called? Forces tab to control what is excluded. I almost messed it up. See how exclude is turned on? You can include and exclude different ones. By default, they're all included. What you would do here is say, okay, I only want to include the ones I pull in, and then pull in gravity and anything else that you have. Yep. Thanks for the question.
That was a good one. Any other questions, live audience? Yeah, it's also on Mac as well. Yeah,
yep.
Definitely. All right, so we're going to dive in. Somebody's wondering, do we have the same sub-D system in Octane? I don't know. Have you used that?
Yes.
Yes.
So similar to this, if you're talking about this tag right here, the Redshift object tag, you have a similar tag in Octane. I don't know it off the top of my head in case somebody wants to yell it at me, but it's essentially an Octane tag. You're going to find it under tags, under Octane, and it's going to be really similar. What's the name of it? Octane object.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you're going to use that, and inside there's something really similar. It's like a geometry tab or a smoothing tab or something like that, and you could do the same thing. In fact, go watch our displacement tutorial on Grayscale Gorilla. That'll have all of that stuff for you. So if you're not using Redshift, go check out, so these tutorials right here, go check out the Octane one. I think we go over that setting in that tutorial.
Awesome. Let's see here. Someone's wondering, so you still can't only have the flat decal on the front, but I think you covered that with stickers. Somebody was wondering about decals.
Oh, like it's on the back side as well?
Yeah.
I think it's off the back side. Is that not true?
If they're trying to isolate it, they're wondering, is it projecting all the way through, or can you isolate it so it's just the one?
True. I'm sure that's possible. That's a good one. Flat, simple, side, front. Let's try that. Oh!
Ship it.
Man, I was sweating that one, guys, but we pulled it off.
Yep. There's your answer. Just set it to front. There we go.
Awesome.
Then the last one is, and this seems like it's off topic, but we'll see. How to use the sound field in vertex fields. I would like this sound to control my shapes on the vertex field. I've tried many times.
How to use sound in vertex. So here's how I would approach it without even trying it, is have sound affect something else, right? Have sound make a an object move or scale, like a sphere, let's say. There's a classic grayscale tutorial, right? You're making spheres move around with audio. Do that effect, and then use those objects in your vertex. So with any field object, not just, where's my pen? This mouse is ridiculous. I don't know how you people do this. All right, you can go into your settings here. Where is it? So you can set, what's the specific one again?
They're sound field in vertex fields.
Okay, so that's where it is. So under fields, you can drag an object in and use any object as a field. So here's my recommendation. Have the object animate to the sound. If that's what you want different parts of this to move. And let's say it's a sphere, let's say. You can, in your vertex settings, pull in any object. And in that geometry, in your fields, you can come down here to say surface, let's say, and you can already see it. If we turn off our sphere, you can see that the surface of this sphere is affecting the geometry. And if we just scale this up and down, it's going through. And in fact, because we already have it set up, you can see all the weird material stuff happening over on the side. But now you can use objects that are animating to control your vertex maps. And if you don't want just this ring to go through it, you can go into your your vertex settings and say volume. Now it's a full volume that's going across it. And you can, in other words, you can animate, you can have the sound effector do this, broop, 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 broop. You can make that noise, sample that noise, put it in your sound effector, broop, 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 and then once it's doing that, you could use it to create these effects. Hopefully that helps. That would be the way I start to approach it. I'm sure there's, like everything in cinema, there's like 10 different ways, but that'd be the first way I'd approach it.
Yeah, that looks pretty good.
Thanks.
I think that's a good start. Somebody's wondering, I guess this is more of a product question, but they're looking for organic textures, like organs, guts, or something. I think we have a medical illustrator or animator.
I think we have a medical illustration animator.
Yeah. So,
that-
organic materials or
that
materials.
is a little bit harder to capture without some legal problems on our end, but I'm sure we'll maybe look into that. I don't know. Does anybody have one off the top of their head that they would know of? There's probably a collection
packs?
out there.
It really depends, because then each organ is wrapped a certain way too. So it's not just like one material on all of it.
Yeah, that's tough. I haven't seen it. But maybe somebody, hopefully in the comments, is a medical illustrator.
Yeah, somebody volunteer that.
Right.
Awesome.
Anything else?
Yeah, Substance. Yeah, you can use it in Substance Painter and things like that.
That's true.
Last one from the audience. We do have time for one more. And if not, let's give Nick another round of applause.
Thank you, guys.
The Grayscope.
Thank you, Matthias.
Yeah, always a pleasure, brother.
Awesome.
Always a pleasure. So once again, for those of you, get scanned, and if not, go to 3dmotionshow.com. Make sure to register. We're going to be giving away that Dell laptop and the Sense tablet. And up next is going to be Andrew Hess, so stay tuned, and we'll see you in about 5.